I was sacrificed to the cruel Alpha, Part 2. My cruel husband set 3 impossible tasks to test me. Chapter 1, The Honeymoon's End. I woke on my 3rd morning as Luna to the sound of rain against the windows and an empty bed. Ryker's side hadn't been slept in, again. For the past 2 nights, he'd kept his word about sleeping on the couch, giving me space to adjust to our new reality. But something had changed yesterday. The warm, almost tender man from our wedding night had vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating Alpha I'd first met. He'd been polite but distant at breakfast, professional during the pack meetings I'd attended, and completely absent by evening. I'd fallen asleep wondering what I'd done wrong. Now, as I dressed in jeans and a sweater, I heard voices coming from the sitting room. Deep, serious tones that made my stomach clench with worry. I crept to the bedroom door and listened. "Can't be certain of her loyalties yet," Ryker was saying. "It's too soon. Alpha, with respect, she's proven herself admirably these past few days," came Beta Morrison's voice. "The pack is already responding well to her." Surface responses. "We need to know who she really is underneath the diplomatic training. We need to know if she can be trusted with pack secrets, with our lives." My blood ran cold. They were talking about me. "What are you suggesting?" Commander Chen's voice now. "Tests. 3 of them. Each designed to reveal a different aspect of her character, courage, wisdom, and loyalty. If she passes all 3, then I'll know she's truly fit to be my Luna. And if she fails?" Morrison asked quietly. A pause that stretched too long. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens." I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from making a sound. Tests. He was planning to test me like I was some kind of recruit, not his mate. The betrayal cut deep. I'd thought we'd been building something real, something based on mutual respect and growing attraction. Instead, he'd been evaluating me like a potential threat. "When do you want to begin?" Chen asked. "Today. The first test involves Fenrir." My blood turned to ice. Fenrir was Ryker's dire wolf, a massive, vicious creature I'd glimpsed only from a distance. The beast was legendary even in my old pack, known for its size, aggression, and complete inability to tolerate anyone except Ryker himself. 3 pack members had been hospitalized trying to approach it. "That's ambitious," Morrison said carefully. "Fenrir has never allowed anyone else near him." "Exactly. If Anya can find a way to connect with him, it will prove she has the courage and intelligence to handle the unexpected. Luna needs to be able to think under pressure, not just follow predetermined plans." "And if the wolf attacks her?" Chen's voice was sharp with concern. "I'll be watching. She won't come to serious harm." But there was something in Ryker's tone that suggested he wasn't entirely certain of that. They were quiet for a moment, then Morrison spoke again. "What are the other 2 tests?" "The second involves the Fey merchants arriving next week. She'll need to negotiate a trade deal without any guidance from me." "The third?" Ryker paused. "The third will test her loyalty to this pack above all others. Including her birth pack." The implications of that sent terror racing through me. What could he be planning that would force me to choose between the Bloodfang pack and my own people? "I'll make the arrangements," Chen said. "Good. Bring Anya to the North Compound in 1 hour. Don't tell her what's coming, I want to see her natural reactions." Footsteps moved toward the door, and I scrambled back to bed, pulling the covers up and pretending to sleep. I heard them leave, then silence. My mind raced. An hour. I had an hour to prepare for whatever Ryker had planned, and I was going in blind. But maybe that was exactly what I needed to do, go in as myself, not as someone trying to pass a test. If he wanted to see who I really was, then that's what he'd get. Even if it terrified me. Chapter 2, The First Test. Exactly 1 hour later, Commander Chen knocked on my door. I'd spent the time getting ready and trying to calm my nerves. I wore sturdy clothes, boots, jeans, and a thick jacket, figuring that whatever was coming would require practical preparation. The Alpha requests your presence at the North Compound, Chen said formally. Gone was the warmth from our previous interactions. Of course, I replied, matching her professional tone. We walked in silence through corridors I hadn't seen before, heading toward a section of the compound that felt different. The air was thicker here, wilder. We passed fewer pack members, and those we did see watched me with expressions I couldn't read. Finally, we stopped at a heavy metal door guarded by two of the largest wolves I'd ever seen in human form. Luna, they acknowledged with respectful nods, but their eyes held warning. Chen opened the door, and we stepped into what looked like an arena. High stone walls surrounded a circular space about 50 feet across. Bleacher-style seating rose on one side, where I spotted several pack members gathering to watch. At the far end sat Ryker, perfectly still and completely focused on me. But it was what occupied the center of the arena that made my breath catch. Fenrir was enormous, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with midnight black fur and eyes like molten gold. Even lying down, he radiated power and barely contained violence. His ears were pricked forward, tracking my every movement, and I could see the muscles in his hindquarters tense as he prepared to spring. Anya. Ryker's voice carried clearly across the space. Come here. I walked toward him on unsteady legs, very aware of the massive predator tracking my movement. When I reached the seating area, I had to look up to meet Ryker's cold blue eyes. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to a spot beside him. I sat, noting that we were high enough to be out of immediate danger but close enough to see every detail of the drama about to unfold. Do you know why you're here? He asked. I assume you're going to tell me. Something flickered in his expression, approval or annoyance, I couldn't tell. Fenrir has been my companion for 5 years. In all that time, he's allowed exactly one person to approach him freely, me. He's attacked or threatened every other pack member who's tried. Ryker's gaze never left my face. Your task is simple, enter the arena and make physical contact with him. My heart stopped. You want me to touch him? Yes. Any kind of physical contact will suffice. A hand on his head, his back, anywhere. I looked down at the massive wolf, who was now staring directly at me as if he understood every word. His lips pulled back slightly, revealing fangs that could easily tear out my throat. And if he attacks me? Then you'll learn to be faster. Ryker's voice was utterly flat. But I have faith in your intelligence. You've proven you can think your way through problems instead of relying on brute force. Apply that here. I stood slowly, my mind racing. This wasn't just about courage, it was about reading the situation and finding an approach that didn't get me killed. Any restrictions? I asked. None. Use whatever method you think will work. I walked down the stone steps toward the arena floor, hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. Behind me, I heard murmured conversations from the gathered pack members. Betting odds, probably. At the arena entrance, I paused and really studied Fenrir. He was magnificent and terrifying, but I'd grown up around wolves. There had to be something I could work with. His posture was alert but not overtly aggressive. His ears were forward, which suggested curiosity rather than immediate threat. His tail wasn't raised in dominance, just lying naturally. Most importantly, his eyes never left mine. He was evaluating me just as much as I was evaluating him. I opened the arena gate and stepped inside. The change in Fenrir was immediate. He rose to his feet in one fluid motion, and I got the full impact of his size. Standing, his head reached nearly to my chest. He could take me down in a heartbeat if he wanted to. But he didn't move toward me. He just watched. I stayed absolutely still, letting him get used to my presence. Fighting every instinct that screamed at me to run, I began to speak in a low, steady voice. Hello, Fenrir. I'm Anya. I know you don't know me, and I know you have no reason to trust me. I kept my voice calm and non-threatening. I'm not here to hurt you or challenge you. I'm just here to meet you properly. His ears twitched at the sound of my voice, but he remained motionless. Slowly, carefully, I sat down cross-legged on the arena floor. It was a position of vulnerability, showing him I wasn't a threat. It also put me at his eye level instead of looming over him. "You're beautiful," I continued, meaning every word. "Ryker must be very proud to have you as his companion. You've been protecting him for years, haven't you? Making sure he stays safe." Something shifted in those golden eyes. Interest, maybe even recognition. I thought about everything I knew about wolf behavior from my childhood lessons. Fenrir might be dire-sized, but he was still fundamentally a wolf. And wolves responded to certain things: respect, patience, and the right kind of energy. "I'm not trying to replace you," I said softly. "I know you were here first. I know you've earned your place at his side. I'm hoping maybe there's room for both of us." Fenrir took a step toward me. The arena went completely silent. Even the whispered conversations in the stands stopped. Another step. Then another. He moved with liquid grace, every muscle coordinated and controlled. A perfect predator approaching what should have been easy prey. When he was 3 feet away, he stopped and sat down, mirroring my position. We studied each other in silence. I could see intelligence in those golden eyes, ancient and wild but undeniably clever. This wasn't just a beast, this was a creature with thoughts and feelings and opinions. "What do you think of me?" I asked quietly. "Do I seem worthy of your alpha?" He tilted his head slightly, considering the question. Then, to my absolute shock, he lay down and rested his massive head on his paws. In wolf language, it was a gesture of relaxation, of trust. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was the moment. If I was going to make contact, it had to be now, while he was relaxed and open to it. Moving slower than I'd ever moved in my life, I extended one hand toward him. Palm up, non-threatening, letting him see exactly what I was doing. He watched my hand approach his head with those intelligent golden eyes. 6 inches away. 4. 2. My fingertips touched the fur between his ears. It was like touching lightning. Power radiated from him, wild and ancient and utterly free. But there was also warmth, and beneath that, a sense of approval. I let my hand settle more fully on his head, scratching gently behind his ears the way I'd seen Ryker do from a distance. Fenrir's eyes closed, and a sound came from his chest that wasn't quite a growl, more like a rumble of contentment. "Good boy," I whispered. "Thank you for trusting me." The arena exploded in shocked voices and applause, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on was the magnificent creature allowing me to touch him, and the overwhelming sense that I just passed some kind of test I hadn't even known I was taking. When I finally looked up at the stands, I found Ryker staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Surprise, definitely. But also something deeper, more complex. Something that looked almost like pride. Chapter 3, Unexpected Reactions. "That," said Beta Morrison as I climbed out of the arena 20 minutes later, "was the most incredible thing I've ever seen." I was still shaking from adrenaline, but I'd managed to spend several more minutes with Fenrir, even getting him to walk beside me around the arena before I finally left him. He'd watched me go with what I could have sworn was regret. "How?" Commander Chen asked, her professional mask slipping to show genuine amazement. "How did you know what to do?" "I didn't," I admitted. "I just treated him like I would any wolf. With respect. No one has ever gotten that close to him except Ryker," Dr. Park said, having appeared with the small crowd that had gathered around me. "In 5 years, no one." I looked around for Ryker but didn't see him in the group. "Where's the alpha?" "He left immediately after you made contact," Morrison said. "Didn't say a word to anyone." That stung more than I expected. I'd thought he'd at least acknowledge what I'd accomplished, maybe show some sign of approval. Instead, he just vanished. "Luna," Commander Chen said formally, "you should rest." That was intense. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me drained and emotionally raw. "I'll escort you back," Dr. Park offered kindly. As we walked back through the compound, I noticed pack members stopping to stare at me with new expressions. Word was already spreading about what had happened with Fenrir. Some looked impressed, others seemed almost awed. "They've never seen anything like that," Dr. Park explained quietly. "Fenrir is legendary here. Stories are already starting that you have some kind of magical connection with animals." It wasn't magic. It was just patience and respect. Maybe. But the effect is the same. She glanced at me sideways. "You've just gained a lot of credibility with the pack. That wolf's approval means everything to them." When we reached my suite, I found it empty. No sign of Ryker anywhere. I changed out of my arena clothes and sat on the couch, replaying every moment of the encounter with Fenrir. I'd done it. I'd passed the first test. So why did I feel so hollow? Maybe because it had been a test at all. Maybe because instead of sharing something incredible with my mate, I'd been performing for his evaluation. Hours passed. Dinner came and went without any sign of Ryker. I ate alone in our suite, picked at a book, and tried not to feel hurt by his absence. It was nearly midnight when I finally heard the door open. He entered quietly, probably assuming I was asleep. I watched from the bedroom doorway as he moved through the sitting room, his movements tense and controlled. "I'm awake," I said softly. He froze, then turned to face me. In the low light, his pale eyes looked almost silver. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I was waiting for you." Something flickered across his expression, surprise, maybe guilt. "Why?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to explore. "Because we're supposed to be partners," I said finally. "Because something incredible happened today, and I wanted to share it with my mate." He moved closer, and I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like he was preparing for battle. "What you did today was unexpected." "Unexpected how?" "I thought you tried to use force, or dominance, or some kind of Luna authority." He stopped just a few feet away from me. "Instead, you sat on the ground and talked to him like he was a person." "He is, in a way. Different from us, but still intelligent, still worthy of respect." Ryker studied my face in the dim light. "How did you know that would work?" "I didn't. I just knew that trying to dominate him would get me killed, so I had to find another way." "And if there hadn't been another way?" I met his eyes steadily. "Then I would have failed your test. But I wouldn't have gotten myself torn apart trying to prove something through force." "My test." He repeated the words like they tasted bitter. "You know about the tests. I heard you talking to Morrison and Shin this morning. 3 tests, each designed to evaluate a different aspect of my character." I kept my voice level, professional. "What's the second one?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, the Fey merchants arrive tomorrow. You'll negotiate a trade agreement with them. Alone. And the third? We'll discuss that when you've completed the second." I nodded, accepting his non-answer. "Is there anything else I should know? Any other ways you're planning to evaluate my fitness as your Luna?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended, and I saw him flinch slightly. "Anya. No, I understand. You don't trust me. You can't be sure I won't betray you or your pack, so you need to test me. It makes sense from a tactical standpoint. It's not that simple. Isn't it?" I stepped closer, close enough to see the conflict in his pale eyes. "You told me on our wedding night that you'd been thinking about me for years, that you chose me because I intrigued you. But that was before you had to actually live with the reality of having an enemy's daughter in your home, in your bed." "You're not in my bed," he pointed out, his voice rough. "Because you don't trust me there either." The words hung between us, raw and honest. I saw him process them, saw something shift in his expression. "You think this is about trust?" he asked quietly. "What else could it be about?" Instead of answering, he moved closer, backing me against the doorframe. His hands came up to brace against the wood on either side of my head, caging me in without actually touching me. You want to know why I left the arena immediately after you touched Fenrir? His voice was barely above a whisper, but it sent heat racing through me. Why? Because watching you in there, seeing you be brave and clever and gentle all at once, made me want things I shouldn't want yet. His pale eyes burned into mine. Made me want to claim you completely, right there in front of everyone. My breath caught. Ryker. The tests aren't about trust, Anya. They're about giving you time to choose. Time to decide if you can really want this life, this pack. His face was so close I could feel his breath against my skin. Time to decide if you can want me. And what if I already have decided? The question slipped out before I could stop it, honest and raw and completely revealing. His eyes went wide, then dark with heat that made my knees weak. Have you? He asked, his voice rough with need. Instead of answering with words, I reached up and pulled his head down to mine. The kiss was nothing like our gentle wedding kiss. This was fire and need and barely controlled hunger. He pressed me back against the doorframe, his body hard and warm against mine, and I felt years of loneliness and fear melt away under the heat of his mouth. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. The tests, I gasped against his lips. Can wait, he growled, then kissed me again. But even as I lost myself in the taste and feel of him, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that nothing was ever that simple. Not when you were married to an alpha who'd built his entire life on strategy and control. Not when there were still 2 tests to pass, and I had no idea what they would cost me. Chapter 4, The Fey Merchants. I woke the next morning wrapped in Ryker's arms, fully clothed but closer to him than I'd ever been. We'd spent hours kissing and talking in whispered voices, sharing pieces of ourselves in the darkness. But when desire had threatened to overwhelm us completely, he'd pulled back. When we take that step, he'd murmured against my hair, I want it to be because we both know exactly what we're choosing. Not because we got caught up in a moment. I'd been frustrated and grateful in equal measure. Frustrated because I'd wanted him with an intensity that surprised me. Grateful because he was right, rushing into physical intimacy wouldn't solve the deeper questions between us. Now, in the gray light of dawn, I studied his sleeping face. Relaxed, he looked younger, less burdened. The harsh lines of command were softened, and I could see hints of the man he might have been if he hadn't become alpha so young. As if sensing my gaze, his eyes opened. When he saw me watching him, he smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded. Good morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning. We lay there for a moment, just looking at each other, and I felt something settle between us. Not resolution, exactly, but understanding. Whatever else happened, there was something real growing between us. Then reality intruded as a knock came at the door. Alpha, Commander Chen's voice called. The Fae have arrived. Ryker sighed and sat up, running a hand through his dark hair. Time for test number 2. Any advice? I asked as I got up and began choosing clothes for the day. Don't trust anything they say at face value. Fae can't lie outright, but they're masters of misdirection and partial truths. He watched me select a professional-looking blouse and dark pants. And don't let them flatter you into making concessions. They'll try to charm you. Noted. I dressed quickly and efficiently, then turned to find him studying me with an unreadable expression. What? You're not nervous. It was true. I felt calm, focused. This was what I'd been trained for my entire life: diplomacy, negotiation, reading people and finding ways to create mutually beneficial agreements. Should I be? Most people are terrified of dealing with Fae. They're unsettling. I'll manage. He stood and moved toward me, stopping just close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. I know you will, he said quietly. That's what worries me. Worries you how? Because if you succeed, when you succeed, I'll have no more excuses for keeping you at a distance. The admission hung between us, vulnerable and honest. Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed me softly. Good luck, he murmured against my lips, then left me alone to finish preparing. An hour later, I stood in the main hall facing three of the most beautiful and unsettling beings I'd ever encountered. The Fey merchants were tall and ethereally lovely, with pointed ears and eyes that seemed to hold starlight. But there was something predatory about their grace, something that made my wolf pace restlessly beneath my skin. Lady Anya, the apparent leader, said, bowing elegantly. His voice was musical, hypnotic. I am Lord Sylvian. My companions are Lady Morwen and Lord Selim. We are honored to negotiate with the new Luna of the Bloodfang Pack. The honor is mine, I replied formally. Please, be seated. I understand you have goods to trade. They settled gracefully around the negotiation table that had been set up in the hall's center. Pack members watched from a respectful distance, but I noticed Ryker was conspicuously absent. This test I would face entirely alone. Indeed we do, Lady Morwen said, her voice like silver bells. We offer rare metals, enchanted weapons, healing herbs that grow only in the Fey realms. Lord Selim produced an ornate wooden box and opened it to reveal the most beautiful dagger I'd ever seen. The blade seemed to glow with inner light, and the hilt was carved with intricate designs that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. Iron blessed by starlight, he said. A blade that can cut through any armor, wound any creature, even other Fey. Impressive, I said calmly. And what do you want in return? Simple things, Lord Sylvian said with a smile that showed teeth just a little too sharp. Access to your southern border for our travels. Hunting rights in your forests. And perhaps a small gift of your pack's essence. Every word raised red flags. Fey travel often involved activities best not examined too closely. Hunting rights could mean anything from actual animals to pack members who wandered too far alone. And pack essence. Define pack essence, I said coolly. Lady Morwen's laugh was like wind chimes. Nothing harmful, sweet Luna. Just a drop of blood from each pack member, freely given. For our research. Absolutely not. Fey could do terrible things with blood magic, and I wouldn't give them that kind of power over the Bloodfang Pack. I'm afraid those terms are unacceptable, I said pleasantly. All three Fey went very still. Lord Sylvian's smile became sharp-edged. Surely you can see the value of what we offer, he said. Perhaps the young Luna doesn't understand the magnitude of our gifts. I understand perfectly. I also understand that you're asking for things that would compromise my pack's safety and sovereignty. Would you care to propose different terms? The terms are fixed, Lady Morwen said, her beautiful voice taking on an edge of menace. They are the same we offered to your predecessor packs, who were wise enough to accept. My predecessor packs? Lord Selim leaned forward. The packs who previously controlled this territory. Before your alpha absorbed them. They all agreed to our terms eventually. I felt cold understanding wash over me. What happened to the pack members who gave you their blood? Oh, they prospered, Lord Sylvian said easily. For a time. The implications were clear and horrifying. These weren't merchants, they were predators who had somehow gained power over the packs that previously held this territory. Packs that had since been conquered by Ryker. I wondered if he knew. I suspected he did. I'm sorry, I said firmly, but I won't agree to those terms under any circumstances. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. All three Fey smiled, and their beauty became terrible, alien. Perhaps, Lady Morwen said silkily, you would prefer to discuss this with your alpha? We're sure he would be more reasonable. It was a test within a test. They were assuming I had no real authority, that I'd run to Ryker when faced with pressure. My alpha has delegated this negotiation to me, I said calmly. I speak with his full authority. The answer is no. No? Lord Sylvian's eyebrows rose. Such a small word to refuse such generous offers. Then perhaps we should discuss what I'm willing to offer instead. That caught their attention. Fey were curious by nature, and I just presented them with an unexpected puzzle. Speak, Lord Selim commanded. Gold, I said simply. A substantial amount, in exchange for a selection of your healing herbs and one non-cursed weapon per year. Gold is common, Lady Morwen sniffed. Not this gold. This is mountain gold, mined from depths that touch the realm of earth spirits. It holds power that regular gold lacks. I was gambling that they wouldn't know enough about this region's geology to call my bluff. In truth, I had no idea if the gold from these mountains was any different from regular gold. But Faye valued rarity and power above almost everything else. The three merchants exchanged glances, clearly communicating in some way I couldn't detect. Show us, Lord Sylvian demanded. I'd anticipated this. From my pocket, I produced a gold coin that Ryker had given me the night before. Apparently, he'd guessed this might come up. The coin was beautiful, with an unusual luster that seemed to shift in the light. Lord Selim reached for it, then hesitated. May I? Of course. He picked up the coin with careful fingers, then gasped. His eyes went wide, and he whispered something in a language I didn't recognize. It sings, Lady Morwen breathed. The metal sings with earth magic. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was celebrating. Apparently, the gold from these mountains really was special. How much? Lord Sylvian asked, all pretense of casual negotiation gone. 20 pounds of gold in exchange for 50 pounds of healing herbs, one enchanted but non-cursed weapon, and a promise that you will not hunt in our territory or seek blood from our pack members. 30 pounds, Lady Morwen countered immediately. 25, but the weapon must be one of my choosing, not yours. Deal, all three said simultaneously, then looked surprised at their own eagerness. We spent the next hour working out details and formalizing the agreement. By the time we were finished, I had negotiated a trade that would provide the pack with valuable resources while giving the Fae something they desperately wanted without compromising pack safety. As the Fae prepared to leave, Lord Sylvian approached me privately. You are not what we expected, young Luna, he said quietly. What did you expect? Someone easier to manipulate. Someone who would fear us into compliance. His smile was genuine now, lacking the predatory edge from earlier. Your alpha chose well. After they left, I sat alone in the hall, processing what had just happened. I'd passed the second test, I was fairly certain. But I'd also learned something disturbing about the previous packs that had controlled this territory, and possibly about why Ryker had conquered them. Impressive. I turned to find Ryker entering the hall, his expression unreadable. You were watching? I asked. From a distance. I wanted to see how you handled them without any interference from me. He approached slowly, studying my face. You did well. They killed them, didn't they? The members of the previous packs who gave them blood. His pale eyes hardened. Not directly. But they used the blood to create bindings, to control pack leaders and force them into increasingly dangerous agreements. When I conquered those territories, I found packs that had been drained of resources, spirit, and hope. Why didn't you warn me about that specifically? Because I needed to see if you could recognize the danger yourself, could find a way to refuse without creating enemies we can't afford. He stopped in front of me. You did both. And if I hadn't? Then we would have had a very different conversation about your role as Luna. The threat was subtle but clear. I studied his face, looking for the warm, vulnerable man I'd woken up with, but found only the calculating alpha. Is that what the third test is about too? Proving I can make the hard choices? Something shifted in his expression, regret, maybe even pain. The third test. He paused, seeming to struggle with something. The third test will be the hardest, Anya. And I'm not sure either of us will like the outcome. Tell me what it is. Not yet. You need to rest, to celebrate your success today. He reached out and touched my cheek gently. You've done incredibly well, and you deserve to feel proud of that. But there was something in his eyes that looked almost like an apology, and it sent cold dread through my veins. What could the third test be that would make him look at me like he was about to betray me? Chapter 5, The Calm Before. For 3 days, Ryker said nothing more about the third test. Instead, it was as if we were living in a beautiful dream where we were simply mates learning to love each other. He showed me more of the pack lands, taking me on long walks through forests where he told me stories of pack history and his own childhood. We shared meals and conversations that lasted hours. We fell asleep in each other's arms and woke up tangled together, growing more comfortable with intimacy without rushing into anything irreversible. I began to truly understand the man behind the alpha mask. He was brilliant, yes, but also lonely in ways that broke my heart. He'd become alpha so young that he'd never had the chance to just be a person, to make mistakes or be vulnerable. Every decision carried the weight of hundreds of lives. Do you ever regret it? I asked one evening as we sat by the fire in our suite. Taking over so young? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. I regret that I had to. But I don't regret doing my duty. That's not the same thing as being happy about it. Alphas don't get to prioritize personal happiness. Don't they? I shifted closer to him on the couch. What makes you happy, Ryker? Not the pack, not duty, you. He looked at me then, his pale eyes vulnerable in the firelight. This, he said quietly. Sitting here with you. Feeling like I'm not alone for the first time in years. The honesty in his voice made my chest tight. I reached over and took his hand, threading our fingers together. You're not alone anymore. Aren't I? He squeezed my hand, but there was sadness in his expression. We still don't know if you'll choose to stay, Anya. After the third test, you might decide this life isn't worth the cost. What could possibly make me feel that way? He didn't answer, just brought our joined hands to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to my knuckles. The third test hung over us like a storm cloud, growing darker as the days passed. I tried to push it from my mind, to focus on the growing connection between us, but I could see the tension building in Ryker. He became quieter, more distant, as if he was preparing himself for something terrible. On the fourth morning, I woke to find him already gone. A note on his pillow said he'd been called away on pack business but would return by evening. Something about the formal tone made my stomach clench with worry. I spent the day trying to stay busy, helping Dr. Park in the medical center and joining a training session with some of the younger pack members. Everyone was kind and welcoming, treating me like I truly belonged here. It made the thought of the looming test even more painful. As evening approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious. I was pacing our suite when I heard vehicles pulling up outside. Looking out the window, I saw Ryker climbing out of an SUV, and my heart stopped. Because climbing out of the vehicle behind him was my father. Alpha Marcus Blackwood looked older than when I'd left just 2 weeks ago, his face lined with exhaustion and worry. But he was here, on Bloodfang territory, which should have been impossible under the terms of our treaty. Unless something had changed. I ran from our suite toward the main entrance, my mind racing with possibilities. Was something wrong with my birth pack? Had Ryker summoned my father for some reason? Or was this? Oh no. Oh no no no. The third test. This was the third test. I reached the main hall just as Ryker entered with my father and several pack members I didn't recognize, warriors from the Silver Moon pack, I realized with growing dread. Anya. My father's face lit up when he saw me, and he rushed forward to pull me into a fierce hug. Thank the moon goddess, you're all right. Dad, what are you doing here? I asked, though I was terribly afraid I already knew. I've come to take you home, he said, pulling back to study my face. We found a way to break the marriage treaty. You don't have to stay here anymore. The words hit me like physical blows. I looked over his shoulder at Ryker, who was watching our reunion with an expression carved from stone. I don't understand, I said weakly. The Fae, my father explained eagerly. The same merchants who visited here came to our territory afterward. They told us about an old law, a loophole in inter-pack marriage treaties. If you were coerced into the marriage, and you were, darling, no one could argue otherwise. And if your birth pack can provide evidence that you were mistreated or your consent was obtained under duress, the treaty can be dissolved. But I wasn't mistreated. Weren't you? My father's eyes flashed with anger as he looked toward Ryker. Forced to undergo dangerous trials? Made to risk your life with that monster wolf? Threatened with punishment if you failed arbitrary tests? I felt the blood drain from my face. The Fae had told my father about the tests. They'd presented them in the worst possible light, making it sound like I was being tortured rather than evaluated. The tests weren't like that, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Sweetheart, my father said gently, I know you're trying to protect our people. I know you think you have to stay here to keep the treaty intact. But we've found another way. What way? One of the Silver Moon warriors stepped forward, and I recognized him as Captain Hayes, one of my father's most trusted men. We've allied with 2 other packs who have grievances against the Bloodfang pack, he said formally. Combined, our forces are large enough to challenge Alpha Blackthorn's claim to our territory. The treaty becomes void if we can prove it was signed under duress. My heart sank. You're declaring war. We're giving you a choice, my father corrected. Come home with us now, and there doesn't have to be any fighting. Stay here, and we'll assume you're being held against your will and act accordingly. I turned to look at Ryker, desperate to read his expression, to understand what he was thinking. But his face was a mask of cold control, revealing nothing. What do you have to say about this? I asked him directly. It's your choice, he said, his voice utterly flat. You're free to leave if that's what you want. The words were like a knife to my chest. After everything we'd shared, everything that had grown between us, he was just going to let me go? No fight, no argument, no plea for me to stay. That's it? I asked, unable to hide the hurt in my voice. You're just going to let them take me? Something flickered in his pale eyes, but his voice remained steady. I won't force you to stay where you don't want to be. But I do want to, I started, then stopped as I realized what he was doing. This was the 3rd test. The test of loyalty. He was forcing me to choose between my birth pack, my father, my people, the family I'd grown up with, and him. And he was doing it in a way that made it clear he wouldn't try to influence my decision. If I stayed, it had to be because I genuinely wanted to be here, wanted to be his mate and Luna to his pack. Not because I felt obligated or trapped or coerced. But if I left? If I go, I said carefully, what happens to the original treaty? What happens to my people who are living here under your protection? They're welcome to stay or go as they choose, Ryker replied. The treaty obligations will be honored regardless. And if my father's alliance attacks you? Then we'll defend ourselves. The simple words carried the weight of a death sentence. My father's alliance might be large, but the Bloodfang pack had never lost a battle. If it came to war, people would die. Possibly including my father. How long do I have to decide? I asked. We leave in 1 hour, Captain Hayes said. With or without you. 1 hour to choose between the life I'd known and the life I was building. 1 hour to decide if what I felt for Ryker was real enough to abandon everything I'd ever known. 1 hour to pass or fail the most important test of my life. Chapter 6, The Choice. I asked for privacy to consider my decision, and my father reluctantly agreed. Ryker disappeared without a word, leaving me alone in our suite with the weight of 2 worlds pressing down on me. I sat on the couch where we'd shared so many quiet evenings and tried to think rationally. What were the facts? Fact, I cared about Ryker more than I'd ever cared about anyone. Fact, I was genuinely happy here, happier than I'd been in years. Fact, the Bloodfang pack had accepted me, respected me, made me feel valuable and needed. But also fact, my father needed me. My birth pack was facing a crisis, and my decision could determine whether they lived or died. How could I choose between love and duty? Between my future and my past? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I expected to see my father or maybe Emma coming to check on me. Instead, Fenrir padded into the room. The massive dire wolf moved directly to where I sat and laid his great head in my lap, looking up at me with those intelligent golden eyes. Hello, beautiful boy, I whispered, stroking his fur. "Did you come to say goodbye?" He made a soft sound that might have been disagreement. "I don't know what to do," I confessed to him. "Everyone I care about is asking me to choose, and no matter what I decide, someone gets hurt." Fenrir lifted his head and stared at me intently, as if trying to communicate something important. Then he stood and walked to the door, looking back at me expectantly. "You want me to follow you?" He waited patiently while I stood and walked to the door. Then he led me through corridors I'd never seen before, deeper into the heart of the compound. We climbed stairs and walked down hallways until finally he stopped at a door and sat down. I opened the door and gasped. It was an office, clearly Ryker's from the scent that lingered in the air. But the walls were covered with maps, photographs, and documents that told a story I hadn't expected. Pictures of the packs that had previously controlled this territory, but not conquest photos. These were images of malnourished children, adults with haunted eyes, pack houses falling into disrepair. Documents detailing the agreements those packs had made with various supernatural entities, agreements that had slowly drained them of resources and hope. And in the center of it all, a large map showing planned expansion routes. But these weren't conquest routes, they were rescue missions. Detailed plans for how to absorb defeated packs, integrate their members, provide better lives for everyone involved. "He's not a conqueror," I whispered, understanding flooding through me. "He's a protector." Every pack Ryker had defeated had been failing, dying slowly under bad leadership or supernatural influence. He'd given them something better, a chance to thrive, to grow, to be part of something stronger than they could be alone. Including my birth pack. I thought about what I'd learned about the Silver Moon pack situation, the failed harvests, the increasing rogue attacks, the gradual decline that had led to our defeat. Ryker hadn't attacked us because he was greedy for territory. He'd attacked us because we were failing, and our failure was putting our people at risk. "You knew," I said to Fenrir, who was watching me with satisfaction. "You knew I needed to see this." There was more. Financial records showing the resources Ryker had poured into helping absorbed pack members. Medical records of malnutrition and illness that had been treated and cured. Educational programs that had been implemented. And hidden in a drawer I probably shouldn't have opened, personal notes in Ryker's precise handwriting. Plans for our future, ideas for pack improvements, thoughts about governance and leadership. And scattered throughout, my name. References to conversations we'd had, observations about my ideas and suggestions, plans that incorporated my strengths and perspectives. He wasn't just planning to keep me as a political figurehead. He was planning to make me a true partner in leading this pack. I heard footsteps in the corridor and quickly closed the drawer, but I didn't try to hide what I'd been doing. When Ryker appeared in the doorway, I was still standing in front of his expansion maps. "Fenrir led you here," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes. He thought I needed to understand something. "And do you understand?" I turned to face him, this man who was so much more complicated than I'd ever imagined. "You're not a conqueror at all, are you? You're a healer. You take broken packs and make them whole." Something vulnerable flickered in his pale eyes. "Is that what you see?" "It's what the evidence shows. Every pack you've absorbed was failing before you got there. You don't destroy, you rebuild. And what does that mean for your choice?" I walked closer to him, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the carefully controlled hope in his expression. "It means I understand now why the third test was the hardest. Because it wasn't really about choosing between you and my father. It was about choosing between safety and growth, between the familiar and the possible. Anya. My father's pack is failing, isn't it? That's why you targeted us. That's why you're not fighting his challenge to the treaty. You know that if I go back, if the Alliance attacks you and loses, it will destroy what's left of the Silver Moon pack." He nodded slowly. "Your father's a good man, but he's not the leader his people need. Under his rule, they'll continue to decline until there's nothing left to save. But under yours? Under ours," he corrected softly. "They could thrive. They could be part of something bigger and stronger than any single pack." I reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight tension in his jaw. The tests were never about proving I was worthy of being your Luna. They were about proving I was ready to be a true partner, someone who could help you carry the burden of saving everyone. Yes. Build something better than either could be alone. Chapter 7, Facing the Truth. The main hall was tense when we entered, my father and his warriors on one side, the Blood Fang pack leadership on the other. It looked like two armies preparing for battle. My father stepped forward the moment he saw us, his eyes immediately going to our joined hands. Anya, he said quietly. Have you made your decision? I have. I squeezed Ryker's hand once for courage, then stepped forward to face the man who had raised me. Dad, I need you to listen to me. Really listen, without interrupting. Something in my tone must have warned him that this wasn't going to go the way he'd hoped. His face grew guarded, but he nodded. I'm staying, I said simply. This is my home now, these are my people, and Ryker is my mate. Not because I was coerced or forced, but because I choose to be here. Anya, sweetheart, you don't understand. No, Dad. You don't understand. My voice was firm but gentle. You see Ryker as a conqueror who stole your daughter and destroyed your pack. But that's not what happened. I gestured toward the Blood Fang pack members who were watching our exchange with careful attention. Look at them. Really look. Do they look oppressed? Downtrodden? Afraid? I waited a beat. The packs that Ryker has absorbed aren't prisoners, they're thriving members of a larger community. They have better food, better education, better medical care, better futures for their children. He still conquered us. Because we were failing. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but they needed to be said. Dad, our pack was dying. Slow harvests, increasing rogue attacks, young people leaving because they saw no future with us. How long before we ended up like the Willow Creek pack, scattered to the winds because we couldn't provide for our own people? My father flinched at the comparison, but I pressed on. Ryker didn't destroy the Silver Moon pack. He saved what was left of it. Our people are safe here, fed here, valued here. Isn't that what matters? What matters, Captain Hayes interrupted, is that we're not slaves to anyone. We can rebuild on our own, find our own solutions. Can we? I turned to face him. Captain, how many of our young warriors have we lost to other packs in the last 5 years? How many families have left because they couldn't make a living in our territory? He was quiet, but I could see the answer in his expression. I'm not asking you to like this situation, I continued, addressing all the Silver Moon pack members. I'm asking you to be honest about what's best for our people. And what's best is becoming part of something stronger, something that can protect and provide for everyone. Even if that's true, my father said heavily, even if you're right about all of it, you're still my daughter. I can't just leave you here. The pain in his voice broke my heart. I walked over to him and took his hands in mine. Dad, do you remember what you told me the night before I left? You said to be smart, to find a way to survive, and if I could, to find a way to help our people thrive. He nodded slowly. That's exactly what I've done. I found a man who challenges me, who values my intelligence, who wants me as a true partner. I found a pack that needs what I can offer and offers what I need in return. And I found a way for our people to not just survive, but flourish. Tears gathered in his eyes. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. But I'm also terrified of losing you. You're not losing me. You're gaining a son-in-law and a stronger alliance than you ever imagined. I glanced back at Ryker, who nodded encouragingly. In fact, we have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal? Ryker stepped forward, his voice respectful but confident. A full merger, Alpha Blackwood. Not absorption, not conquest, partnership. Your pack keeps its identity, its traditions, its leadership structure. But we pool our resources, coordinate our defenses, share our knowledge and skills. You would do that? Captain Hayes asked suspiciously. Give up the total control you fought for? I never wanted total control, Ryker replied. I wanted security and prosperity for all the packs in this region. If we can achieve that through cooperation instead of conquest, it's a better solution for everyone. My father was quiet for a long moment, processing the offer. Finally, he looked at me. Is this what you want, Anya? Really? More than anything. He sighed deeply, and I could see the moment when his resistance finally crumbled. All right, he said quietly. We'll try it your way. But, he looked sternly at Ryker, if you ever hurt her, if you ever make her regret this choice, there's no alliance in the world that will protect you from me. Ryker inclined his head respectfully. Understood. And Alpha Blackwood? If I ever hurt her, I'll deserve whatever you do to me. The tension in the hall finally began to ease as both packs realized that we'd found a solution that didn't require bloodshed. But I could see skepticism in some faces, hope in others. This is going to take time, I said, addressing everyone. Building trust, working out the details of cooperation, learning to see each other as allies instead of enemies. But I believe it's possible. More than possible, Ryker added. Necessary. The supernatural world is changing, becoming more dangerous. Isolated packs won't survive what's coming. But united, working together, we can face anything. As the evening progressed, the two packs began to mingle cautiously. I watched my father talking seriously with Beta Morrison, discussing resource sharing and territorial boundaries. Captain Hayes was examining the weapons display with obvious professional interest. Young pack members from both sides were eyeing each other with curiosity rather than hostility. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But it was a beginning. Later that night, after my father and his people had been settled in guest quarters, I finally found myself alone with Ryker in our suite. So, he said, pulling me into his arms. How do you feel about your choice? Terrified, I admitted. Excited. Overwhelmed. Like I just committed to something huge and life-changing. You did. We both did. I looked up at him, this man who had become everything to me in such a short time. No more tests? I asked. No more tests. You've proven everything you need to prove. He leaned down to kiss me softly. Though I suspect marriage to me will be challenging enough without artificial trials. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I think I can handle it. Good. Because I have plans for us, Anya. Big plans that involve building something unprecedented in the werewolf world. Tell me. Instead of answering with words, he showed me the maps and documents from his office, explaining his vision for a confederation of allied packs. A network of cooperation and mutual support that could weather any storm. It won't be easy, he warned. There will be packs that resist, threats from other supernatural species, political complications we can't even imagine yet. Then it's good that you won't be facing it alone. No, he agreed, his pale eyes warm with love and determination. We'll face it together. As we talked long into the night, planning our future and the future of our people, I realized that the tests had been worth it. Not because they'd proven my worthiness, but because they'd forced us both to be completely honest about what we wanted and needed from each other. I'd come to the Bloodfang Pack as a sacrifice, a political prisoner meant to seal a treaty. I was staying as a partner, a Luna, and a woman who'd found exactly where she belonged. The third test was over, and I'd passed it not by choosing between my old life and my new one, but by choosing to build something better than either could be alone. Something that would last for generations to come.
End of Part 2. What happens next? In Part 3, the enemy Alpha's secret changed everything. Just as Anya settles into her new role and the pack merger begins, a shocking revelation threatens to destroy everything she and Ryker have built. A traitor within their own ranks has been feeding information to a hostile supernatural faction, and the evidence points to someone Anya has come to trust completely. As supernatural forces close in on their territory, Anya must navigate deadly political intrigue while discovering a secret about Ryker's past that changes everything she thought she knew about her mate. The revelation will test not just their love, but their very survival as enemies both old and new converge on the Bloodfang pack with devastating consequences.